Howdy, my name's Mudbrain, and there's blood on my hands. The blood of bosses, that is. I've been dipping my toes into the pool of bosses in hopes of pulling out a pet or two, and maybe some juicy loot along the way. And you know who's got some of the juiciest loot of all? The Angel of Death herself, Nex! To be fair, I haven't actually spent much time in her arena. I've got about 100 kills from masses on launch week. However, this is not a guide. I do not make guides. This is lore. So go ahead, make yourself cozy, ask your butler to fetch you a cup of tea, and I'll tuck you into bed with my sweet bedtime story of failure, murder, and betrayal. So, Nex. Her story starts well before she was born? Created? Combined? I'm getting ahead of myself. Her father, so to say, was Zaros, Big Purple Daddy himself, Lord of Darkness and Master of being stabbed in the back. Early on in Gillinor's history, he established his empire with an iron fist, campaigning across the planet with allied forces from other realms. To each of these allies, he promised them something, mostly power and land, but to one crucial ally, he promised them something far different. You see, Gillinor has these things called dragons, right? They fly, breathe fire, so on and so forth. You may have heard of them. Imagine if you could ride them into battle. Now, boy howdy, that would be one powerful army. And as fate would have it, Zaros learned of a lizard-like race on a planet far away who tamed beasts pretty similar to dragons. So, being the ingenuitive sort, he makes his way there to see if he can cut a deal with them, as he had with all the rest. Turns out, the Ilyanka, as they're called, are pretty damn happy where they are. Aside from one small problem. Ain't got no babies. Their race has grown infertile, and the most knowledgeable of their kind have no answers. Now, if there's anything you should know about Zaros, it's that he thinks very highly of himself. He is divinity, after all. The creation of divinity, born of divinity, dude's a literal walking divine energy. With that in mind, he thought this would pose no challenge. The Ilyanka agreed to travel back to Gillinor with him and attempt to tame dragons so that they can fight in his army, with the promise that Zaros will one day cure their infertility. And he had no intentions of letting them down. Zaros is a god of his word. He made his way back to his homeworld of Runescape, where he could siphon divine energy straight from the source and attempt to mold it into life just as his mother had with him. On his own, he was only capable of reforming the essences of other races into new beings, as he puts it. The only way to imbue them with consciousness and real life was with divine energy, and without the skill of a true Elder God, they would need a source of that to live. If it goes like the Majorat, that source will be each other. Of his experiments, he reformed the essence of vampires, Icene, Aviancy, and demons, creating little more than vicious, unthinking monsters. Nihil, he called them. They were nothing. However, one of these stood out above the rest, a Nihil forged from the essence of each of these four beings. And by stood out, I meant literally. She's fucking tall. While Zaros intended to leave them all behind on Runescape, he felt something for this Nihil. Being different from the others meant that they'd inevitably tear her apart, so he took her with him and granted her a gift. Consciousness. Specifically, a fragment of his own. Like a divine brain transplant, I guess. She quickly learns from what Zaros has shared with her and proves eager to learn and grow. She even picks out a name for herself in the infernal tongue. Nex. It means murder. She is death. She is walking death. Not very subtle, but sure. Okay, go off, queen. Oh, but Zaros never did manage to fix the Ilyanka's infertility, though. That doesn't come up again in this story, so I figured I'd just let you know. Anyways, as time went on, Nex rose through the ranks of Zaros' army, from being considered little more than a weapon, all the way to legatus of the 16th Legion. She would spread the word of Zaros to those who would listen, and had a penchant for recruiting humans, especially those that interested her. Of these were three in particular whose names you may already know. Torva, Pernix, and Virtus. While Nex is out and about gallivanting with her humans, shit's getting kinda serious back home at Santiston. You all know the story by now. Zaros gets betrayed by his legatus Maximus Zamorak. The two get impaled with a staff of Armadillo in the scuffle, and some of Zaros' purple flurp gets injected right into Zamorak. Zaros retreats in a puff of smoke, leaving only his clothes behind. With the God King seemingly dead, Zamorak's troops descended upon Santiston, culling any who chose not to side with them. Most Majorat defected to Zamorak on the spot, but not all of them. Zaros' most loyal follower, Azanadra, put up a pretty good fight, but in the end, Zami's demonic troops overwhelmed him. Luckily for him, Zamorak felt some sympathy for the fellow Majorat, and instead of killing him, they just locked him up in a big old pyramid. With Zaros MIA, as Nadra locked away and a good chunk of their forces turned against them, Nex was all that remained to lead the Zarosian army. Centiston had fallen to Zamorak's forces, leaving them with nowhere to defend. Nex, in a last-ditch effort, marched her army north. Far north. Many Majorat had pledged their allegiance to Zamorak to save their lives, but Nex knew the Majorat better than most. They require a ritual sacrifice every 100 years or so to keep themselves alive, and it must be done in a very specific location on Gielinor. Well, that time happened to be coming close. If they could control the ritual site, they could starve out Zamorak's strongest warriors. It was risky, but it was their only option. So y'all remember Saradomin? Nowadays, you probably think of him as the blue guy who hates Zamorak. But up until this point in history, Zanli wasn't even a blip on Sarah's radar. Nah, before that it was blue versus purple. Saradomin hated the fuck out of Zaros. So word gets around that Zaros' strongest weapon, the Angel of Death herself, is marching the last of the Zarosians out to an icy plateau. Saradomin sends an army out to wipe this purple smudge off his planet once and for all. But Nex's nickname is a lot more than a catchy boss title. She fucks things up. While she leads armies, alone she's capable of taking on hundreds of foes, and perhaps even a god. As such, Saradomin's troops had to approach this fight strategically. So, I'm sure you're expecting some grand final fight, last hurrah from our big girl Nex, and technically, yeah, that is what happened. You want to see the wiki page on it? That's it. Just a few sentences. Only 2 references, one of which is incredibly recent. Let me sum it up for you. Nex leads her army to the ritual site. Saradomin sends an army out to fight her. They fight. Sarah's army can't win, so instead they lure her into a cave and seal it up with magic. They build a temple around it and then freeze it over with ice magic, so everybody inside is stuck in a frozen slumber. She's not dead though, oh no. She's too angry to be dead. For thousands of years, she lay there dormant, seething with rage, seeking vengeance on all who dared oppose her god. Unbeknownst to her, the god wars were still in full force overhead. Over 3 millennia had passed since her defeat, with Zamorak becoming public enemy number 1. Zaros' empire was little more than a myth by now, as Saradomin had done his best to erase Big Perp's name from the history books. With a loose alliance forged between Saradomin, Armadil, and Bandos, the 3 gods worked together to forge a weapon strong enough to fight Zamorak. The result is the God Sword, one of the most iconic and least practical weapon designs in RuneScape history. After the blade was forged, Armadil tasked a group of avian seas to deliver it through the mountains to their army. Unfortunately, these fine birdfolk were ambushed by a pack of demons along the way, forcing them to retreat into the nearest shelter and call for backup. This just so happened to be a cave to the Temple of the Lost Ancients, or what we better know now as the God Wars Dungeon. Reinforcements are called, and now this mountainside scuffle has become a full-on dungeon kerfuffle, with all 4 gods cramming their armies down the hole. I've talked about this whole debacle before, and if you're watching this video, chances are you've already seen that one, but like, I don't know, go watch it again.